Hello, dear listeners. I'm your host, Genevieve Hopkins, and welcome to episode 3 of the Wheel and Cross podcast as we prepare for the winter solstice and Mother's Night later this month. As the days grow shorter and the chill of winter settles in, nature prepares for a celestial event that marks a significant turning point in the seasonal cycle. The winter solstice, which is approaching in the Southern Hemisphere on the 22nd of June and occurs on the 23rd of December in the Northern Hemisphere, holds great cultural and spiritual significance for many communities around the world. The word solstice is derived from the Latin sol, meaning sun, and sistere, meaning to stand still. Due to the Earth being tilted on its axis and its elliptical orbit around the Sun appears to travel the sky from north to south throughout the year. When it reaches its northern or southernmost limit, it appears to stand still before reversing its direction. This results in 2 solstices every year: the summer solstice around the 23rd of December in the Southern Hemisphere and the 22nd of June in the Northern Hemisphere, and conversely the winter solstice, marking the shortest day and longest night of the year around the 22nd of June in the Southern Hemisphere and the 23rd of December in the Northern Hemisphere. In many cultures around the world, the winter solstice marks the official beginning of winter. In today's episode, we'll take a closer look at the Northern and Western European traditions for celebrating the winter solstice, including the Sami traditions of the Paleolithic reindeer mother cult, born from the Ice Age, the Celtic winter solstice celebrations, Roman Saturnalia, and Germanic Modrenicht, or Mother's Night traditions that still echo within and influence our modern customs. I'll also share some of the ways I celebrate winter solstice and Mother's Night in my own household. This podcast is free, but if you like my work and would like to support me so that I can continue doing it, please consider a paid subscription. If that's not possible and you enjoy this podcast, I would really appreciate your reviews on any of the podcasting platforms you use. Feel free to share this podcast and leave comments on the podcast page. Welcome to episode 3 of the Wheel and Cross podcast, Echoes of the Ice Age, the Winter Solstice, and Mother's Night. I would like to acknowledge the custodians of these lands on which I work and live in Australia's capital region, the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, and I pay my deep respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to all First Nations across Australia. Over 2 million years ago, early humans migrated to Europe from the equatorial regions and adapted to the fluctuating Ice Age climate, marked by the large expansions and contractions of ice sheets across different parts of Europe at different times. The Scandinavian ice sheet, also known as the Fennoscandian ice sheet, was the largest and most significant during this period. It covered much of present-day Scandinavia, including Norway, Sweden, Finland, and parts of Russia. The ice sheet extended southwards, covering the Baltic region, and had significant impact on the topography of the area. Other glaciations also occurred in different regions of Europe at different times. The British Isles experienced extensive glaciation, with ice sheets covering large parts of what is now the United Kingdom, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. Further south, the Alps were also heavily glaciated. These alpine glaciers extended across the mountain range, reshaping the valleys and carving out iconic features such as U-shaped valleys and moraines. Other mountainous regions in Europe, including the Pyrenees and Carpathians, also experienced glaciation at one time or another. The ice sheets reached their maximum extent during the last glacial maximum, around 26,000 to 19,000 years ago, and ended about 10,000 years ago. This glacial expansion and contraction influenced the movement and adaptation of early humans in Europe and is known as the Paleolithic period. Paleolithic humans, our own species of Homo sapiens, as well as Homo neanderthalensis, were well adapted to survive and even thrive in these environments. They were hunter-gatherers, living in small, nomadic tribal or family groups spread widely through a sparsely populated landscape. They developed and used stone tools, hunted animals, fished, and gathered edible plants for survival. The availability of food sources varied with the climate and region, but it generally included large game animals like mammoth, reindeer, and bison, as well as smaller animals, fish, shellfish, nuts, and berries. These early humans had rich cultural and ritual traditions that were deeply interconnected with their environment and survival strategies. Paleolithic cultures developed intricate belief systems based on polytheistic animism and shamanism. They held a deep reverence for nature and relied on their intimate knowledge of the environment for survival. Rituals and ceremonies involving dancing, singing, and storytelling played a significant role in Paleolithic cultures and were often related to hunting, fertility, and seasonal changes. Cave paintings, rock engravings, and sculptures were created as a means of communication, storytelling, and possibly as part of religious or ritual practices. They often depicted animals, hunting scenes, and symbols associated with fertility and spirituality. Traditional hunter-gatherer cultures of the Paleolithic period transitioned to the Neolithic in most of Europe around 10,000 years ago, with the emergence of agriculture, domestication of animals, settled communities, technological advancements, and the development of complex social and religious systems. However, the hunter-gatherer way of life persisted until relatively recently for the people of the Northern European tundra, particularly the Evenki of Russia, China, and Mongolia, and the Sami, who still live in the northern parts of Scandinavia and Russia. The Sami are an indigenous peoples from the northern regions of Scandinavia, including Norway, Sweden, Finland, and parts of Russia. They are defined by their Sami languages and culture, which stems from the larger Uralic language family that includes Finnish, Estonian, and Hungarian. These cultures and languages are distinct from the rest of Europe, which mostly belong to the Indo-European language group that originated from a single prehistoric language called Proto-Indo-European. The Uralic language and culture originated from people who were indigenous to the region along the Volga River in what is now Russia. During the Corded Ware period, which spanned from around 3000 BCE to 2300 BCE, Uralic people from the Volga region began to migrate northward. Some settled in the frozen tundra of the Arctic and eventually became the Sami people. Over the centuries, the Sami developed a deep connection with the Arctic environment and have adapted to survive and thrive in these challenging conditions. The Sami have a long history of interaction and trade with neighbouring cultures, including the Norse, the Karelians, and the Russians. However, like many indigenous communities, they have also experienced periods of marginalisation and cultural assimilation, particularly during colonisation efforts by surrounding nations. Despite these challenges, the Sami have successfully maintained their cultural identity and traditions. Their rich oral tradition has passed down stories, legends, and knowledge through thousands of generations. Traditional crafts such as duoji, or handicrafts, yoik, vocal music, and gatki, traditional clothing, continue to play an important role in Sami cultural expression. Today, the Sami people are recognised as an indigenous community with their own parliament in each of the 4 countries where they reside. Efforts to preserve and revitalise Sami culture, language and rights are ongoing, as the Sami assert their rights to self-determination, land and natural resources. The Sami people are not homogeneous, and their way of life varies based on their geographic location. Coastal Sami communities have traditionally relied on fishing, seafaring and maritime activities as their primary means of sustenance. On the other hand, the tundra-dwelling Sami, often referred to as reindeer herders or nomadic herders, have centred their livelihoods around the semi-domesticated reindeer. The tundra-dwelling Sami were traditionally nomadic hunter-gatherers, following the herds of reindeer on their seasonal migrations across the northern landscape. They eventually semi-domesticated their herds to take advantage of reindeer milk and to use them for transportation, but they still maintained their nomadic lifestyle. It wasn't until the 17th century that the Sami's nomadic way of life was restricted, and they became reindeer herders, losing some of their nomadic lifestyle in response to political and economic pressures. Despite these changes, the Sami have maintained a rich cultural tradition centred around reindeer. Remnants of Paleolithic and later Neolithic customs can still be seen and found in their rituals, beliefs, and way of life. Although some aspects of the Christian religion have recently been incorporated into these belief systems. Reindeer were not only a vital source of food and milk for the Sami, but they also relied on them for transportation, fur for clothes, sinews for sewing, antlers and bones for tools, weapons, and ritual objects. Female reindeer were particularly revered by the Sami. They are larger and stronger than the males, and they establish the social hierarchies of the herd, as well as forage and defend their territories. Reindeer mate in autumn, and the males shed their antlers at mating time in response to higher levels of testosterone. During the winter months, the pregnant female reindeer develop antlers, which they shed after giving birth in spring or early summer. Sami folklore tells of magical reindeer that fly through the night sky, connected to folklore about the hallucinogenic effects of the Amanita muscaria mushroom, more commonly known as a toadstool mushroom or fly agaric. Emily Buda wrote for The Atlantic in 2018. Until just a few hundred years ago, the story goes, the indigenous Sami people of Lapland, a wintry region in northern Finland dense with conifer forests, would wait in their houses on the winter solstice to be visited by shamans. These shamans would perform healing rituals using the hallucinogenic mushroom Amanita muscaria, a red and white toadstool fungus that they considered holy. So holy, in fact, that the shamans dressed up like the mushrooms for their visit. Wearing large red and white suits, the shamans would arrive at the front doors of houses and attempt to enter. However, many families were snowed in, and the healers were forced to drop down the chimney. They would act as conduits between the spirit and human world, bringing gifts of introspection that could solve the family's problems. Upon arrival, the healers were regaled with food. They would leave as they came, on reindeer-drawn sleds. It is said that the toadstool mushroom makes people feel like they're flying or journeying, and is the reason for the name fly agaric. These stories likely captured the imagination of neighbouring European cultures and influenced the popular image of Santa Claus and his flying reindeer, which would have been female with their winter antlers. Reindeer were known to search out and eat Amanita muscaria, and their urine was ritually drunk to induce hallucinations without the sickness that accompanies eating the mushroom itself. The shaman also sacrificed themselves in this way, eating the mushroom and suffering the ill effects so that their urine could be drunk by those in attendance, who would be able to journey without being sick. Within Sami folklore, the reindeer mother, also known as the Mataraka, is a divine and powerful figure associated with fertility, abundance, and the well-being of reindeer herds. She is believed to be the protector and caretaker of the reindeer, ensuring their survival and prosperity, and thus the survival and prosperity of their human herders. The reindeer mother was often depicted with her neck outstretched and her legs splayed out as if running or flying. Her antlers were said to represent the tree of life, carrying birds, the sun, the moon, and the stars. Winter solstice held great significance for the Sami. An ancient Sami folktale tells the story of the reindeer mother, who was said to travel across the southern horizon at winter solstice to bring back to the world the life-giving sun between her antlers. The reindeer mother volunteered to sacrifice her own heart and implanted it at the center of creation so that her heartbeat and blood pulsed life into all creatures, resurrecting them from the frozen dark of winter. A Sami winter solstice tradition involves smearing warm butter on doorposts as a sacrifice to Beavi, the Sami sun goddess associated with reindeer, fertility, and motherhood. Beavi gained strength from the sacrificial butter to fly higher and higher into the sky after the winter solstice. She was often accompanied by her daughter in an enclosure of reindeer antlers, or a sled made of antlers and pulled by reindeer. The cult of the reindeer mother is an ancient spiritual tradition that dates back thousands of years and has survived through the Sami culture. Reindeer are also considered sacred to the indigenous peoples of Siberia and Mongolia, who share similar beliefs about the reindeer and their connection to the seasonal cycles. Further south, where deer supersedes reindeer populations, the similar belief system of the deer cult was more widespread and is still an important part of indigenous cultures such as the Ojibwe and Menominee tribes of North America, where the deer clan represents leadership and protection. In Nordic mythology, particularly in the Prose Edda's Gylfaginning, the stag, Eikthirnir, chews the leaves of Yggdrasil, the Nordic sacred tree, while water drips from the antlers, forming the numerous rivers throughout the 9 worlds of the Norse cosmos. The name Eikthirnir is a compound word meaning oak thorn, a fitting description of staghorns. The Eddic poems Grimnismal and Gylfaginning also mention 4 stags who dwell within the sacred tree of Yggdrasil and feed on its leaves, their horns creating the tree's crown of antlers. In Lithuania and Latvia, the sun goddess Saula was said to fly across the heavens at the winter solstice in a sleigh pulled by horned reindeer, throwing beads of amber and apples down through people's chimneys. Rohenitsa, Ukraine's winter goddess, is frequently depicted with antlers growing out of her head. The deer cult is also important in Celtic folklore, particularly in Scotland and Ireland. In Celtic myth and folklore, the deer symbolises strength, agility, and wisdom. In a mythic story from Ireland, the hero, Finn McCool, chases a magical deer that leads him to the other world, a mystical realm beyond the physical world. Deer, particularly the white stag, appears in medieval folktales such as the Arthurian legends. The deer is also associated with Cernunnos, the Celtic god of fertility, wealth, and the underworld, who is depicted with antlers on his head. In some Celtic traditions, it is believed the souls of the dead take the form of a white deer and roam the forests. Cailleach, who we met in the previous episode on the Winter Queens, is often associated with deer. She is sometimes depicted as a shapeshifter who can transform into a deer, or she is accompanied by a herd of deer. There are many folk tales telling of her animosity towards hunters who disrespect the laws of nature, especially those who try to poach her precious herd of deer. Deer are also connected to the idea of sovereignty, the role of women in sanctioning male sovereignty over the land, and the importance of women's right to sovereignty and her own will in ancient Celtic beliefs. An echo of this can be found in an Old English nursery rhyme. Hart is an Old English term for a stag. The hart he loves the forest, the hare he loves the hill, the knight he loves his bright sword, and the lady loves her will. The Sami people and their rich traditions centered around reindeer have undeniably influenced global folklore. From the ancient archetypal reindeer mother, who evolved into the deer mother, to the beloved figure of Santa Claus, with their deep connection to reindeer herding and the Arctic landscape, the Sami have contributed to the mythos of Santa's sleigh being pulled by these majestic creatures. The Sami's cultural practices and beliefs, rooted in the pristine Arctic environment, continue to evoke echoes of the Ice Age. For the ancient Celts, Romans, and Germanic peoples, the winter solstice was a time of gathering together and sharing abundance with families and communities by enjoying elaborate feasts, drinking, festivities, and merriment. The return of the sun was a central theme in Celtic winter solstice celebrations. Ancient sites, many aligned with the solstice sunrise or sunset, were of particular importance, such as Stonehenge in England, in Ireland at Newgrange, the Hill of Tara and Loughrew in Meath, Knockrow Passage Tomb in Kilkenny, and Carrowkeel in Sligo, and in Scotland at the Maeshowe Cairn in Orkney. These sites were erected by people from a culture even older than the Celts, and were believed to hold mystical energies and used for rituals and ceremonies to honour the rebirth of the sun. They are still used in the present day as a focus of winter solstice celebrations for modern-day pagan groups. Many Celtic myths and folktales relate to the winter solstice, and we have already explored some of these in the previous episode, the first day of winter, Holler's Day, winter archetypes, and the art of hygge. Another winter solstice folktale from Ireland and Scotland tells the story of Lugh and the long night. Lugh is known as a skilled warrior, a master of many crafts, and a god associated with light, knowledge, leadership, and first harvest, or the harvest of the grains, called Lughnasadh. He fights against the darkness of winter, sometimes represented by Cailleach at the winter solstice. Lugh uses his wit, strength, and magical abilities to overcome the forces of darkness and bring light back to the world. It was believed that his victory marked the turning point of the winter solstice, when days would gradually become longer and the power of darkness would wane. More modern stories and folk tales about the rebirth of the sun include the story of the battle between the Oak King and the Holly King, or the Oak King and Cailleach, as well as the legend of the mistletoe. We'll delve further into the story of the Oak King, Holly King and Mistletoe in an upcoming episode. As with the autumn and spring equinoxes, the winter solstice was seen as a liminal time when the veil between the worlds was thin, allowing for glimpses into the future and spiritual insights. Various forms of divination and fortune-telling practices were employed during this time, such as scrying, dream interpretation, and the casting of runes or ogham sticks. In some Celtic regions, processions and festivals were held during the winter solstice. People would gather, often wearing masks or costumes, and parade through villages and sacred sites, singing, dancing, and playing music. These lively celebrations were believed to chase away the darkness and bring blessings for the year ahead. We will explore these traditions of wassailing and their evolution into caroling in an upcoming episode. Ancient Celts regarded hospitality as a sacred duty, especially during winter solstice gatherings, as it was believed that by opening their doors and generously sharing their blessings, people invited good fortune into their lives. Celtic traditions surrounding the winter solstice bear similarities to the Scandinavian Yule festivities and predate the Christian celebration of Christmas in the Northern Hemisphere. While the Jutes in Britain, led by the Anglo-Saxon King Ethelbert of Kent, embraced Christianity around 595 AD and eventually converted entirely by 850 AD, the Celtic peoples of Wales, Ireland and Scotland in the north and west steadfastly clung to their native customs and beliefs. Many old winter solstice customs were adapted and assimilated into the Christian traditions of Christmas. However, a few of these Celtic traditions have endured through the ages, including decorating the inside of homes with evergreen plants. In another upcoming episode, we will explore the meaning and significance of these plants during the winter solstice. These days, old winter solstice traditions are being revived. Winter solstice celebrations at ancient ceremonial sites are becoming more popular and well attended, as are winter solstice processions through towns and city centres. In Wales, groups seeking to revive and reconstruct Celtic spirituality and customs have named the celebration at winter solstice Alban Arthur, to differentiate it from the Christian celebration of Christmas. It is derived from Welsh, meaning light of winter or light of Arthur, and involves familiar Christmas traditions and practices without religious overtones, and given meaning through the old folklore of the region. After the Romans conquered Western Europe, they introduced their own winter solstice celebration of Saturnalia, which merged with local traditions. Saturnalia, named after the Roman god Saturnus, was a month-long festival that began on December 17 and reached its climax on December 25 with Sol Invictus, the birthday of the unconquered sun. This festive period culminated with the calends on January 1, marking the start of the new year. Romans adorned their homes and public buildings with evergreens and bright lights, and the streets came alive with processions and gift exchanges. During Saturnalia, social norms were turned upside down and revelry reigned. A mock ruler or master of the revels, also called the Lord of Misrule, presided over the feasting, with masters serving servants and normally prohibited activities like gambling becoming permissible. People dressed in animal skins or gender-swapped their clothes. The festivities also included special events such as Juvenalia, a festival dedicated to children. Amidst these weeks of celebration, a particular day was set aside to honour the sun, whose annual crisis at the winter solstice was closely associated with these winter festivities. This day, known as Sol Invictus, day of the birth of the unconquered sun, held great significance in the Mithraic religion. one of the influential mystery religions of the Roman Empire. Mithraism, along with the more public cult of Deus Sol Invictus, competed with Christianity for followers in the late Roman Empire. Interestingly, when the Christian Church eventually decided to celebrate the birth of Christ, they chose December 25 as the date, perhaps an acknowledgement of the existing influence of Mithraism and Sol Invictus. The merging of Roman traditions with local customs during the winter solstice period played a significant role in shaping the celebrations and festivities we observe today at Christmas. We'll learn more about the origins of Christmas in next week's episode. The Germanic peoples, including the ancient Germanic tribes and later the Norse and Anglo-Saxon cultures, had rich and vibrant traditions surrounding the winter solstice through to midwinter. One prominent tradition was the celebration of Yule, a festival lasting several weeks that marked the turning point of the year. We will explore many of the Yule traditions in future episodes for the month of July. For now, let's delve into the celebration of Moddernicht, or Mother's Night. Anglo-Saxons brought their seasonal customs to Britain in a migration that started in the 5th century CE. One of these was Moddernicht, or Mother's Night, which was celebrated on the night of December 24 or 25, and was dedicated to honouring and invoking maternal ancestral spirits and goddesses. During Moddernicht, people would gather and participate in various rituals and ceremonies to honour their ancestral mothers and seek blessings for the coming year. It was a time of reflection, remembrance and gratitude for the women who came before them. There is limited surviving information about the specifics of the celebration. However, it is believed that offerings were made to ancestral mothers, prayers were recited, and fires were lit to symbolise warmth and protection. In 725 AD, Northumbrian monk Bede Venerabilis wrote about Moddernicht in his historical treatise De Temporum Ratione, or the Reckoning of Time. The ancient peoples of the Angli began their year on the 25th of December, when we now celebrate the birthday of the Lord, and the very night which is now so holy to us, they called in their tongue Moddernecht, that is, the Mother's Night, by reason, we suspect, of the ceremonies which in that night-long vigil they performed. The celebration of Moddernicht may be connected to the worship of the Matronae in the regions of Germania and Gaul during the Roman period, reaching its height during the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE. They are often depicted as a group of 3 goddesses, standing or sitting side by side, holding various objects and symbols associated with life, fertility, childhood, motherhood, protection, and prosperity. These symbols included items such as cornucopias, baskets of fruit and bread, or they could be depicted holding infants or baby animals. Depictions of the Matronae can be found on stone carvings, altars, and other religious artifacts, mainly in the Rhineland region of modern-day Germany, particularly along the river valleys of the Moselle and Rhine. Other significant concentrations of Matronae dedications have been found in Gaul, particularly in the areas corresponding to modern-day France and Luxembourg. The significance and specific attributes of individual Matronae varied from one region to another, reflecting local customs and traditions. The Matronae were often associated with specific localities, and their names frequently included the names of specific tribes or places. For example, the Matronae Ophaniae were worshipped in the Ophanium region of modern-day Germany. The Germanic Moddernicht may be related to the older Nordic celebration of Disseblot. The Disir were female supernatural beings associated with fate, ancestry, and protective spirits. They were often regarded as guardian spirits of particular families or lineages, and were publicly venerated during the first 3 days of the winter season, called winter nights. Winter nights, or veternater in Old Icelandic, was also the time for a lesser-known and private ritual sacrifice that took place in individual households. The Alfa Blot was led by women, and the usually hospitable Norse barred their doors against strangers during this night. Visablot and Alfa Blot will be explored in more detail closer to the time of Samhain at the end of the seasonal year. The winter solstice was a significant time for various ancient cultures in Europe, each with its own unique traditions. These diverse traditions all emphasize the importance of community, feasting, and the symbolic elements of light, renewal, and abundance during the darkest time and the longest night of the year. As winter solstice marks the shortest day and longest night of the year, so I like to add to my silvery winter-themed decorations by putting up gold decorations to represent the sun. I also display reindeer ornaments and images in a nod to the ancient Sami reindeer mother and to represent my female ancestors for Modrenicht. If you are particularly connected to your Celtic heritage, or if you're celebrating Christmas in the Northern Hemisphere, you might like to finish decking the halls with conifer branches, pine cones, holly, ivy, or mistletoe. I prefer to mark the Nordic celebration of Yule at midwinter, the 15th or so of July in Australia, so I hold off decking the halls until Lucinata and the first day of Yule on the 1st of July. Because my main winter celebration involves a large midwinter Yule party with all the trimmings, my winter solstice dinner is a more personal and quiet affair, just for family and sometimes close friends. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast, Echoes of the Ice Age, the Winter Solstice and Mother's Night. Next week, we'll explore the origins of the most famous of winter solstice celebrations, Christmas, as well as the custom of wassailing, carolling, and the slightly creepy Welsh custom of the Mari Lwyd. See you next week for episode 4, Winter Solstice and the Origins of Christmas.